Ryan McDowell is a Dynasty writer, commissioner, and podcaster who co-owns Dynasty League Football. He's the architect of the productive struggle strategy in Dynasty. He's a longtime teacher, he's a dad, and he loves the University of Kentucky. These are his late-round perspectives. Are you of the belief that the offseason is better than in-season as a fantasy analyst?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you get the fun stuff, right? You get the free agency and the draft, but you also just get to relax a little bit more than the in-season grind. So, yeah, for Dynasty guys, I think the offseason is where it's at.
It's not as monotonous, at least, you know. Like, I mean, this is my first perspectives episode of the off season. So I haven't done a perspectives episode for a while now. And of course, got to bring on my Dynasty 101 here and Ryan McDowell. But
oh man.
Yeah, man, it's such a monotonous, you know, grind in season. I'm not complaining about it. I don't think anyone's complaining about it, but it's nice to get a little creative and do stuff that you don't get to do all the time. We have this like 2 to 3 month period where we're not only like fixing our Dynasty rosters and stuff, which is fun, but also, you know, the scouting stuff, the prospecting stuff's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, for sure. My wife says, you know, really when we have a busy schedule, my wife says every day has a name, right? Like, right. And that's what it's like in the regular season. Every day has a name. It's, you know, you're watching games, or it's waiver day, or it's, you know, it's podcast day, or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's just nice to get out of that. The prospect stuff, as you said, brings, you know, like a whole sense of newness, to, you know, to the hobby, to the game. So a good little refresh there.
Yeah, no doubt. So look, I like to open these shows up by just kind of talking about you, the person, the analyst, but your journey and how you got to, I mean, you've been around as long as I've been around with this stuff. I think you've been around longer than I've been around, you know, with the fantasy football stuff. So tell people, you know, what you're all about, how you got the DLF, all that good stuff.
Sure. So, let's see, I started playing Dynasty, really started playing fantasy in, like 05, 04, 05, something like that. A work buddy got me into it. I'd never played fantasy. I played Dynasty. A Dynasty league was my first league. So I really kind of got baptism by fire a little bit and fell in love with it immediately. You know, for me, it was just really, I was like aggressively active in everything I did. You know, whether it was just, of course, it started out in this one league that my friend got me in, and I was sending trade offers all the time. Like, maybe it was more annoyingly active than aggressively active, or maybe it more from one to the other. But I just kind of felt like I climbed the ladder from there. And, you know, I mean, again, we're talking early 2000s. I found message boards. I found the Football Guys message board. Basically became one of the more active members there, and having conversations and building relationships and doing that kind of stuff every day. I mean, throughout the off season and everything. And then Twitter was really the game changer for me. Just kind of carried that community building idea over to Twitter. And eventually that led to the guys at DLF reaching out and asking if I was interested in writing. I'd done a little bit of writing. I'd done some stuff for Sigmund Bloom over at Football Guys. Just, I mean, like not even paid content, just very low level stuff. So I don't know. I didn't feel like it was something I was seeking out necessarily as far as getting into the content creation space. I was actually, it feels funny to think about this now. I was actually nervous that I would be able to come up with enough ideas to write about.
Yeah.
And like,
here you are 15 years later.
Yeah, exactly. Is there enough content, or am I creative enough to think of something to even write about? And, you know, that wasn't really a problem once I got started. Yeah, that was 2012 when they brought me on. So, and have been there ever since, kind kind of climbed the ladder there. Was again super active. I was one of the first paid writers that DLF brought on. That was right about the time that they moved to a subscription model, like so many other sites did, 10 or 12 years ago. So yeah, it kind of just fell in my lap, but at the same time, I worked hard for it, right? Like, I mean, I felt like I was always doing fantasy dynasty stuff.
Yeah.
For the past decade plus.
Yeah, I mean, well, not only that, I don't think people realize that you have a job too. Like, you're not just strictly doing the DLF stuff. I mean, you have been a teacher have you just been teaching since college, just out of college? That's what you did? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Started teaching in 1999. I'm still teaching at the same school. I've been at the same school ever since. If things go well, I've got a little over a year left and I can actually retire and then we'll see what happens with the fantasy football space. But, it's funny. So again, at DLF, I started out as one of the 4 or 5 new writers that they brought on the first time they had ever hired writers. And over the years, just worked my way up, right? We have a senior writer status. I accomplished that. And they created I think they called it a team lead role or something, basically kind of gave me a new title. And eventually, after about a decade, got an ownership stake at DLF. And I remember, and this is, maybe it wasn't 10 years. This is probably 4 or 5, 6 years ago at this point. But I remember they announced that on Twitter and kind of made a big deal about it, which was nice. And lots of congratulations and kind words and things. But a lot of the comments were like, oh, I thought you started DLF, or I thought you already owned DLF. So that was funny to see. But yeah, you're right. A lot of people just assume this is my full-time gig. Sometimes it certainly feels like it with the hours I put in, let's just say after work, in air quotes, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean,
we record at 1:00 on a Wednesday here.
Yeah, exactly. To be fair, like, I do think that yourself, your brand, your being is very much so synonymous with DLF at this point, not only because of longevity, which, by the way, you being at the same school and being at DLF all of this time, you are like Mr. Loyalty. My God, like you have found your spots and you stick with them, and that's really good to see. It's great to see because it's not easy to find that, especially in today's business world and job world where people are understandably moving around because if they don't feel comfortable, then do it, but it's nice to see the opposite end of that where, you can stick around the same spot and enjoy it and get fulfillment from that, with both of these gigs that you've had. Now, you mentioned that you started in Dynasty basically as you got into fantasy football, which is not the normal path. I've always said, and this is sort of like a business take from my perspective too, but as the fantasy football industry matures, you find people more and more obviously kind of going down that marketing funnel and that playing funnel, if you will, going from, okay, I'm going to join my office league to, oh, I really like this. And, you're going to lose some people along the way, but it's the people that are very into this that then get into Dynasty, that get into Devi, and they just get more and more into this game that we all love. But you starting from a Dynasty perspective is way different than almost anyone that has hopped on perspectives in the past. So what do you think? And obviously I know, you and I have played in dozens and dozens of leagues together through the years. I know that you play a lot of Dynasty, but you play redraft too. But what is it that makes you like Dynasty more than redraft? What makes it a better game? And if someone's thinking about making that switch, what do you think the selling points are?
Yeah, I always say it's like in this time of the year is really the perfect time to figure it out, right? If your fantasy football season ends, your work league, your home league, family league, whatever it might be, if that ends and you miss it, right? If it's like week 17 or the playoffs are rolling around and you're missing the idea of setting a lineup or checking scores, you probably need to try out Dynasty. Like that's kind of your calling, I think. But for me, it's just the year round aspect I love because, I didn't necessarily have that experience because, again, started with Dynasty, so I didn't know there was any other way. But once the season ended, and it's January, February, you're enjoying the playoffs, but you're also looking ahead to those rookies, or you're thinking about the big free agent signings, or what have you. Those are things I enjoyed, and you and I and so many others grew up playing Madden or playing all these video games where. I didn't even play the game really, right? Like just sim to the off season, sign the free agents, make the trades, do the drafts. That was always more enjoyable for me. And in a lot of ways, that's what Dynasty is. So, I think those are certainly good things about it, just the year round piece of it. I really like the idea of Dynasty managers just having different goals, right? Your team is in a different spot, and it can be enjoyable to tear down that team and totally rebuild from scratch. That can be a fun process inside of the game. And obviously that probably means you're not winning for a year or maybe 2 years. But again, that can be fun. And that's, of course, not something you would ever want to do in a redraft league. You would never want to lose or want to, trade your best players for futures or whatever, young guys, unproven guys, whatever it might be.
I've been playing Dynasty probably for about 10 years or so now. And I'd say about 3 or 4 years in was when I really beefed it up and played more. And I remember I wasn't, maybe it was only a couple years in, but you and I were doing drafts together, and I remember always seeing your productive struggle approach to drafts, and always saying to myself, like, because look, I think a lot of people when they're not super into Dynasty, they don't think enough about asset valuation as opposed to just straight up production, and it's very easy to think about things in more of a mathematic way instead of looking at it in a more logic game theory driven way, right? And so what I mean by that is I remember back in like 2016, 2017, please don't Google this article, but I remember I wrote an article looking at the true value of draft picks, right? Like looking at like what the actual like point per game output you would expect to get from a 101, 102, 103, etc. And I remember looking at it and I'm like, oh yeah, 103 is sort of like Doug Baldwin and stuff like that. But like, it's not that's not the proper way to think about that stuff. Right. And I credit you just through me playing a lot, right? And like seeing things and just experimenting with things, really opening my eyes to just seeing that side of things. And now I always preach the idea of your team needs to have both a production side of it, right? Because you need to eventually win. You can't just accumulate the value side, but the value side is the other side, right? Like you need to have in the market, you need to have these pieces on your team that are accumulating value, even if those guys aren't necessarily the ones that are giving you insane production. And so, I say this because you've made me a better Dynasty player coming from a redraft perspective, more so a redraft perspective. That's where I got my start with all this stuff. But from your perspective, what has helped you in Dynasty then become a better redraft player? Because look, right now I'm working on the prospect guide, trying to get that out the door. Yeah. And there's plenty of people who are like, oh, I don't need the prospect guide because I don't play Dynasty. And look, I'm not saying all this just to sell my prospect guide. I'm saying this because, I want to hear your thoughts on what Dynasty has done for your redraft game, not just, how you play Dynasty and how good you are at Dynasty.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the prospects, and I do think that's kind of the obvious, and that's the right answer for me is that you're able to get in on some of those younger players, typically rookies. You're just more aware of them, more about them, their situation, their upside. So yeah, if you look at my my Scott Fishbowl roster every year, it's littered with rookies, and that has helped. But that's like a blessing and a curse kind of deal, right? Sure. I mean, I always feel like my dynasty is showing on my redraft rosters that we're slanting a little too far towards those rookies and those young guys. But I mean, we've typically seen across all four positions, we've seen the average age of top 12 and top 24 scorers. Those players are getting younger every year. We're not. I mean, right? Like the third year breakout wide receiver feels like, I mean, it doesn't even feel like 10 years old. It feels like 100 years ago.
Right.
That was even discussed. And, obviously we've always kind of been able to count on rookie running backs to some degree, but, rookie quarterbacks, rookie tight ends are making an impact earlier and more often than ever before. So I think just playing Dynasty and shifting that information, that knowledge over to redraft can certainly be beneficial in scoping out those young guys. You just got to keep keep the perspective. Remember that it is just a 1-year game when you're drafting that team. I'm talking to myself here because, I've got half a team of rookies on my redraft teams every year.
I mean, look, historically, rookies have been pretty decent draft picks versus the market, at least in redraft. So, you're not totally, going crazy by taking all those first year guys. But yeah, I always try to like sell the prospect stuff as like, you're going to know who the higher end guys generally are in a draft. Yeah. Like the layman is going to know who those guys are. And, a lot of times this is something that I'm kind of workshopping and thinking about, but like, a lot of times I'll say like in my draft guide rather for season long, I'll sit there and I'll say, hey, draft rookies late, throw those darts because they will hit. Like some rookie will hit. We didn't have as many this year, but some of them will hit. And so, I have someone like Jalen McMillan as a late round dart thrower or whoever. Sometimes they really, really hit like Puka Nacua. But, Jalen McMillan's a great example where, he doesn't hit right away. You get the Chris Godwin injury. He's still not really hitting even after the Godwin injury. And then eventually things kind of come full circle for him. And I say I'm workshopping this a little bit because I do think that there's something to, especially in a more casual league, not really going after those guys aggressively in your draft, but just making sure that you're ready for them on the waiver wire when those times sort of arise. But that's the point too, is that having the understanding of these prospects in the middle of the season, because whether you have a guide, it doesn't have to be my guide. It can be it could be listening to Ryan. It could be whatever. Having the knowledge of these prospects that were day 2, day 3 guys, when they inevitably, one of them gets some sort of opportunity is really, really helpful for then knowing how much free agent budget to spend or whether you should be aggressive in using a waiver priority on those players. And I think that gets lost a lot where people just kind of section off and silo these 2 different games as this does not play off of this one. But at the end of the day, man, these guys are we're just trying to get guys who score fantasy points, and having as much knowledge as possible is always a big plus. This episode is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. The big game is this weekend and Underdog has you covered. Underdog's celebrating the big game by giving everyone a no sweat entry. That means you either cash in or you get your entry fee back and bonus credit. Join Underdog before the big game kicks off on Sunday by signing up with promo code LATEROUND to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. And you get a free pick and you get that no sweat entry. Check it all out today, underdogfantasy.com. For you personally, what do you think's been the biggest edge for you in Dynasty? Again, you and I have played in plenty of leagues together. You and I have seen each other in championships in Dynasty through the years. What do you think has been your edge in order to get there consistently?
I really think it goes back to that activity level. Like a lot of times, and, I guess take this however you want. I feel like I just care more than other people. And, it's higher on my priority list. I'm putting more time into building my team, into that kind of daily monitoring, which might just be, reading Roto World blurbs or reading Twitter timeline or whatever, sending those trade offers, checking the waiver wire. Like as far as success in Dynasty, I'm not a scout. I don't have the spreadsheets, like some people, at least not the in-depth spreadsheets. But I think that's, that's what it is for me. Just being so active and trying to beat everybody else in that way.
I think that one thing that I've found with you too, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that you have a really, really good pulse on the market and understanding, when to let a guy go, when to buy into a guy just based on, ADP trends. And do you think some of that is you managing a lot of that stuff or like having done so much of that stuff in your history?
Yeah, for sure. So, I remember, again, going back to 2012, I mean, I certainly recognized even then the importance of ADP. I mean, every time I, did a startup draft, I was looking for ADP. It's so easy to get now. And I mean, some of your listeners will think this is crazy, but back then this was not readily available information in any way. Right. I mean, a lot of ways you were going in blind to Dynasty startup drafts. And I remember Mike Clay had run a handful of mock drafts to collect ADP. I think he was with BFF at that point. And it was wild to me that you could ask somebody to do a 20 round, pretend draft essentially. And he had stopped doing that. And maybe that was just for one project he was doing. I reached out once I started at DLF. I reached out to Mike and, kind of said, do you care if I pick this up? And obviously got his blessing there. And I've been doing ADP mock drafts every single month, including in season since late in the 2012 season. So yeah, I feel like I'm pretty up to date on those value trends. And I think that's a huge piece of it. This will just make you go crazy, but probably for the first 4 or 5 years that I collected that ADP, it was manually entering every single draft position into a spreadsheet.
Oh my God.
Before, I think Scott Fish finally showed me, how to save some time there. And, that was much appreciated. But yeah, I really knew that the numbers in and out, back then and in the early years when I was typing every single one of them. But even since then, doing those drafts, participating in every single one of them. I feel like I do have a good sense of the ADP and the trade market, the value overall of these players. And again, that just goes back to being active as well. You don't have to do every single mock every month, but checking out that information, understanding how the value is changing and how it changes so quickly. I mean, we've got, we of course love what we do over at DLF and when we like the consistency of it and the historical data we have to offer. But, Keep Trade Cut is an awesome resource. And, they're able to kind of pick up the slack on things that we can't or, honestly just can't do. And that they're getting that information updated. I was going to say daily, probably, hourly. Immediately. Immediately. So you see some crazy value shifts there. And that's always a good indication of the market of a player too.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the piece too, where again, you being active, anyone being an active manager can really, really be helpful. Cause for me, I'll be doing my dynasty rankings. I update them once a month and I'll be updating them. And then after I'm done updating, I'll compare them to different markets and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, I had no clue that this player was being valued in this way. And so it's important to be on top of the market component piece of it. And I feel like you've definitely always, had that as part of your arsenal. With other dynasty managers though, what have you seen through the years that they just get consistently wrong, that they do wrong and incorrectly?
I think it's really easy to get stuck in the middle of your dynasty league, right? And, there's a Bible verse that basically says be hot or cold, but don't be lukewarm. And I mean, so it's biblical. We should not be this lukewarm, stuck in the middle, the 6th seed or the first team out of the playoffs. Like you either want to tank it and tear it down or, trade for some players and go for it. But being stuck in the middle, the mindset is, I'm one piece away, or let's wait until week 10 and see what happens. And it's just too late at that point.
So basically don't be the Mike Tomlin Steelers is what you're saying.
Don't be the 8-8, the Titans of old. Now the Steelers have taken, right. The Steelers have taken that title now. Yeah. It's great to say you made the playoffs every year for, 10 straight years, 15 straight years. But if you're getting bounced in the first round, it doesn't feel that great.
Yeah, 100%. Let's get into some player talk, and some player takes. Right now, Jaden Daniels, this was, at least according to Keep Trade Cut, Jaden Daniels, and maybe this plays into what we were saying about like the immediate reaction stuff and whatnot with ADP.
Well, there's good and bad with that, right?
There is. Yeah, exactly. So Jaden Daniels right now is ranked ahead of Lamar Jackson. That's keep trade cut. I think you guys in your last ADP update still had Lamar over Jaden Daniels, but he's still just one spot away. Does that surprise you? Do you think that he should be in that position ahead of Lamar, or is this a situation where if you had Jaden Daniels, you'd be playing a little bit more safe?
I'm not surprised. I'll start there. Certainly not surprised. I mean, that's kind of one of the calling cards of Dynasty players is that we're going to chase youth, certainly going to chase productive youth as hard and fast as we can, right? I think actually I saw a tweet from KTC that he had even overtaken Josh Allen. So maybe Daniels may be up to that top overall player in the Dynasty Superflex format. We'll have to check on that. But regardless, he's in the conversation no matter whose data you want to go by. And I mean, we've just obviously got the consistency from Lamar Jackson. I mean, a top 10 fantasy season based on points per game in 6 straight years, I believe. And top 2 the past 2 years, of course, coming off his career best year this year. And he's 28 years old. So, I mean, I love, and I do this. I recommend this. Buying years is what I refer to it as. So if you've got Lamar Jackson at 28 years old, you've got Jaden Daniels at 24 years old, you can make some transaction there and maybe even get something back potentially. You're buying 4 years back and getting similar production. So that's what you have to really decide. Is the production going to be similar? Right. Lamar outscored him by 3.5, 4 points a game this season. Is that a fluke? And that's the toughest thing that's the toughest question to answer this time of year with guys like Daniels, because we've seen it before. I mean, he looks like a surefire decade-long Right. QB1 dynasty asset, but so did RG3. And even this time last year, and they're not in the same category as far as accomplishments on the field. But this time last year, we were talking about Anthony Richardson as a top 5 dynasty quarterback. And now he's outside of our top 15. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously risk. In the end, I'm still taking Lamar. I'm taking Josh Allen. I think it's fair to look at Daniels over everyone else, though. Hurts, Mahomes, anybody else you want to throw in there.
Yeah, I had them. I think I might have them even in the same tier, but I still have and some of that. Like whenever I tier my rankings and stuff, I'm looking at the market because it's important. Like I care what the market's saying about these players because again, that's the value side to the player equation. Where of course you want production, but you still want to acquire as much value as possible on your team, and so that has to play into the way that you're developing your rankings and who you would be okay with trading for and all that kind of stuff on your team.
Right.
The thing with Daniels, and to me, super flex quarterbacks are always, to me, the hardest, most difficult thing to figure out in Dynasty, just because quarterback is a relative crapshoot from a prospecting standpoint. It's not easy to get it right. Right. And then also, it's just so unbelievable. Like just in super flex, it's like you either have them or you don't. Right. There's not much in between. Very rarely do we get these like Jared Goff or Baker Mayfield situations where, they were kind of hovering there and then, they shot up a little bit. Now they're more consistent. It just doesn't happen all that often. So you're either like going down with a sinking ship with Anthony Richardson right now, or you're, you got lucky and you drafted Jaden Daniels, maybe even over like a Caleb Williams or something like that. And so I see it with Daniels as I still see the delta in terms of performance to be enough between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson because of the consistent, like we've seen them do it over and over again and giving us that like over what Jaden Daniels did this year, giving us that like, again, 3-4 point advantage. That to me is enough to say I'd rather have them than take on the age gap. Right. And take on the age gap, I should say. So that's the main reason why I would have them below those guys. But you got to at least play the market a little bit here, man. And if the market is saying, this is really similar, like CJ Stroud last year, CJ Stroud was,
good point.
I mean, he was moving up a ton. He was in Josh Allen range at times on Keep Trade Cut and on other sites. And that was a little bit different to me because Stroud was a pocket passer. Stroud was not the dynamic dual threat guy that Jaden Daniels is. So I think that the Jaden Daniels discussion is, and not only that, but to me, Daniels is more accomplished after year one than what CJ Stroud was. But that's why I think the Daniels discussion is a discussion that he should still belong at least in the stratosphere of those guys because of the age factor.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. You talked about the importance of those dynasty tiers in your rankings. And typically when I'm deciding if 2 players, 3 players are in the same tier, I just try to have that conversation with myself. Is there any scenario where I would take this player over this player?
Right.
Is there any scenario where I would take Daniels over Lamar or over Josh Allen? Sure. Yeah. There is. I mean, typically 80-90% of the time, I'm going to prefer the 2 veterans, but yeah, there's a time I would go with Daniels, maybe if I'm going heavy with a young roster or what have you. So yeah, I do think because of that, I do think they belong in the same tier.
I was also looking at DLF ADP, January ADP, and the rookies outside of Daniels, you guys have it with ADP. I shouldn't say that you're ranking them this way because I'm going to ask you how you have them ranked, but it was Bo Nix, then Caleb Williams, then Drake May. Now, look, I'm not the biggest rankings guy in the world because I think there's a lot of nuance to this, right? Like we're looking at this in a very linear way. There's a very real chance that those 3 are really clumped together and there's a big tier break after whatever, right? But I'm curious about your thoughts on the rest of this rookie class from last year. Really, really good rookie class. Where you would have them ranked, especially now that Caleb Williams has Ben Johnson, Drake May has a new head coach and new coordinator up in New England. Would you agree with that ADP or do you have them mixed up in a different order?
Yeah, I've got them in a different order. There is actually a pretty sizable gap in our ADP between the 3 of them. So you're looking at about a round, a full round or more between each guy, not necessarily close. I've still got Caleb as the top guy of those 3. I think obviously some frustrations as a rookie, but a lot of understandable issues, to blame that on, not fully in his control. And I mean, I think we're going to see a big Ben Johnson effect that Caleb, Odunze, DJ Moore, all these guys see a big spike in value, whether you're talking DLF ADP or, best ball drafts or what have you. I think we're going to see these guys be risers over the next few weeks after that hiring.
Do you find that there is still a lag with that because people are wanting to see how other people are reacting to news items like that? So obviously, the Bears get rid of their coaching staff. They hire Ben Johnson, the hottest ticket item in this coaching carousel, and an offensive minded coach who's done marvelous things in Detroit, just crazy good things in Detroit. Now, obviously that would mean good things for the Chicago players there. But from your perspective, as someone who has handled ADP for the last 10 plus years, do you find that there is still a window after these hires happen where, you could have gone out, like, let's just say Ben Johnson got hired yesterday. You could have gone out and traded for Caleb Williams or Rome Odunze and still gotten a relatively decent discount on those guys before the inevitable, do you think that they're still going to rise over the next month from now moving forward? Or do you think that that's already happened almost immediately?
I think it happens immediately. I mean, it's not always reflective immediately in our data, right? I mean, we're collecting this data once a month. Those mock drafts typically take a week to 10 days. And sometimes things like hiring a new coach or an injury or, whatever might happen, a draft pick in the spring. Those things kind of get lost in the shuffle and you wait until the next month to really see it impact in our data. Now, again, we've got other resources and I don't think you should be looking at any of those individual resources as kind of the end all be all. If you're relying 100% on KTC, ADP, then, you could get yourself in trouble. You could end up overpaying for kind of the flavor of the week, right? I mean, we've seen plenty of players, especially in season, their value spike and then a few weeks later, they're not even getting on the field or they're hurt or whatever. So I think you take our stuff, you take their stuff, you take your stuff, mix it all together and come up with a player value and decide how you want to react to that.
Okay. So sorry, I interrupted you. So you had Caleb Williams first out of those three. Then how do you have Bo Nix and Drake May?
Yeah, I've got Nix and then May. So that does, I think for most people that would reflect a change. I obviously had May as my QB3 preseason or during the off season. Nix, I mean, totally surprised me, but he's tied to Sean Payton. Basically, all three of those guys, I'm sorry, not Caleb, but Nix, May, and then even Jaden Daniels, to see them perform at such a high level with limited weapons, it really kind of gives you hope for the future, right? Like Daniels 100%. Did so well with pretty much just Terry McLaurin. Like, let's give him a high upside wide receiver too. Give Drake May anybody, really just any other offensive threat on that team. And then pair another wide receiver with Cortland Sutton there in Denver. And it feels like there's a lot of meat on the bone for all those rookie quarterbacks.
I think that's the reason why, because right now I have Drake May actually above the other two. And a lot of it's just driven by what you were just saying. Like, I think he worked with by far the least of those three last year and showed off, at least that dual threat abilities there. We know that he's also young on the younger side. And that's the main reason. But I think all three, especially if you were able to get Bo Nix in rookie drafts last year, you're feeling pretty good right now in Superflex, especially because now he's a slam dunk, easy, like QB1 type piece for you that you should be able to move forward with and not have to worry about that position, which is one of the nicest things to have in Superflex, to not have to really worry about one of those quarterback spots.
I just think we've heard a lot about this. I know we're going to talk prospects a little bit in a few, but we've heard a lot about how poor this quarterback class is. And, the two guys at the top, potentially, I think that realization of there's not much coming as far as rookie quarterbacks, I think we could see a value boost for May and especially for May, but really for all those rookie quarterbacks from last year. Once we realized kind of what we had and really just how impressive they were with limited weapons.
Yeah, for sure. But speaking of the prospects, we have, I haven't done at all the full blown stuff with my prospecting work. I usually wait to really dig in once we get the official NFL Combine invite list, which comes later and later every year, frustratingly. I've done some work though. I've looked at, I look at NFL mock draft database a lot to just see where guys are projected to go and whatnot. And the running back class from the 15 or so guys that I've inputted into my prospect model, the running back class looks great, like really strong players across the board. So my question to you is that now that we're in this time period in the NFL calendar where the draft, we're basically waiting for free agency and the draft. Free agency doesn't hit until March. The draft hits late April. Are you at a point where you think that because people expect there to be these good running backs, maybe we could get a discount on some existing running backs and backfields? Or are you just kind of backing off and saying, I'm not going to mess with these backfields because I know that there's going to be 10 to 12, maybe like pretty strong backs who could step in and kind of cause disruption to an already established backfield. So if I go and trade for one of those veterans, that veteran could be screwed, right? Are you typically playing it safe right now this time of year, or are you being aggressive and trying to find, because sometimes, like I remember Atlanta a handful of years ago when they had Mike Davis, right? Not to say that Mike Davis was good, right? But everyone just automatically expected Atlanta to go out and get a running back in the draft. They didn't, and Mike Davis was their guy, right? And I'm not saying that Mike Davis was a great fantasy asset. He was horrible, but you got that value boost from him from before the draft to after the draft. So you can gain value just by doing that and then saying, oh, wow, I don't want Mike Davis on my team, so I'm going to trade him away now when people think that he's the assumed starter. So how are you handling that? Is it just case by case for you, or is it something that you aggressively kind of do or don't do?
Well, I would say I've changed over the years. I mean, I think we saw so much volatility at the running back position, from year to year, including over the offseason through draft, through free agency and things years ago, that the way I handled it was basically ignore running backs for as much of the offseason as you can. Stay away from them. Don't buy, don't invest. And that mindset kind of seemed to become pretty prevalent among dynasty managers. Eventually, it just became a value that, okay, they're cheap enough that I'm willing to take that risk, even if they do lose their job. I'm flipping third round rookie picks for possible starters here, or I'm taking these guys in the 10th, 12th, 15th round of a startup draft. The risk is simply worth it. So this year is certainly one of those years that makes you, no matter what your mindset is on that, it makes you rethink it because of what you're talking about. I mean, I saw one scout say there were 30 draftable running backs this year, which is wild. So almost no matter how good you feel about the depth chart of any NFL team, they're potentially adding a running back. There's a few that I think are either safe or the upside is well worth it. The juice is worth the squeeze that I would still be targeting. I think Chuba Hubbard is an exciting, which is maybe the first time this has been said, an exciting dynasty target right now. Yeah. Right. We already saw Carolina invest in the running back position. He essentially overcame that, unfortunately, through the help of the injury to Jonathan Brooks. Hubbard gets rewarded with a new deal. This is a team that has a ton of needs. I can't imagine that they're drafting a running back, right? Signing a running, maybe they sign one, right? I mean, maybe they add some depth if they're really worried about Brooks, which they probably should be. But like that's Chuba Hubbard's job. Yeah, I'm not worried about him losing that in free agency or in the draft. He would, and he's still super affordable. So he would be a player, RB 22 and 81 overall in our ADP right now. He would be a player that I would be targeting in drafts or trades right now. And, there's a couple of others, Josh Jacobs and Joe Mixon, veterans that I think their team could definitely draft a running back, but I also think that their upside on a short term is worth it.
Yeah, for sure. Another team that I was thinking about, because I just did a buy candidates episode for the Late Round podcast, and one player that admittedly I almost talked about, I didn't, because I didn't have enough fluctuation and there wasn't a big enough delta between where I had him ranked and where sort of the market had him ranked, but it was Travis Etienne, right? Where, Etienne, down year, frustrating year, but we know the talent's there. We've seen it. The reason why I felt good was the Liam Cohen hire, of course, and what he was able to do with that backfield in Tampa Bay and, the offensive creativity that he could bring. But also they have Tank Bigsby, and I don't know if they're going to be a team that would go after, like, why would they necessarily, unless they're thinking more longer term, which is very possible. But, they might be a team that at least in the day one, day two, wouldn't necessarily be aggressive in going after a running back. Are there any teams, though, out there that might surprise you that could go after a back? I mean, I saw Ashton Genty get, he got mocked,
Jets,
in a Lance,
right?
In a Lance Zierlein recent mock to the Jets, where I would be shocked out of my mind if that happened. But Lance is tapped in. I mean, this is not just like a random person that's putting together a mock draft, right? And so, like, there could be, like, this class is that good that there could be that kind of disruption out of nowhere where we're like, oh, they have Breece Hall, they have Braylon Allen, they have Isaiah Davis. I think the Jets would be nuts if that ended up happening. But is there a team out there where you could see a little bit of a surprise where we're like, okay, they're feeling pretty comfortable at running back, or we think they are, and then all of a sudden they go after one on day two because his class is looking so good?
I mean, there's a bunch. Honestly, there's probably a 10 or 12 that look like they have established starters, but I think it wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if they drafted a day two running back. There's so many factors to really think about. I think we look at the depth chart, right? We look at the Jets depth chart, and we see Hall and we see Allen and Davis, a couple of rookies who had some success last year, and we crossed them off the list. But you're still thinking about a new coaching staff. Right. Breece Hall, as highly as he's valued in Dynasty, Zierlein pointed out in his write-up, has never had 1,000 rushing yards, has dealt with injuries. I mean, it would still be very shocking, I think, even after he's kind of put that out there. But we've seen crazier things just a few days after the big NBA trade, right?
Exactly.
We shouldn't be surprised by anything at this point. But the Titans were one that I think could make a move, and they're a team that has a couple of running backs already, and Pollard and Tyjae Spears. That would be a team that I could see drafting a running back that would be a surprise. And Pollard, I think, probably has one more year there, and they have an out on his deal that they could move on. Spears, obviously a pretty messy injury history, and he's been in and out of the lineup for them as well. So, but like I said, there's a ton. I mean, the 49ers have to do something. The Giants, the Dolphins have to add somebody. So, guys like Achane, guys like Isaiah Pacheco in Kansas City, they're going to get a new teammate, right? They're going to get some new backfield competition, and just the level of investment there will really tell us how we need to value the veterans moving forward.
Yeah, the other thing that I've thought about, because I'm in the process of sort of putting together the year 2 profiles that I do, because I have the year 2 model that looks at sophomores in the NFL, right, and guys who just completed their rookie season. Not only did that running back, the running back class from last year is like the worst one that model has seen over since 2011, which is what it dates back to. It's that, because even what year was it? The 2014 class with like Jeremy Hill, but even that class had at least a like this one has Bucky. I get it. Like Bucky Irving and Tyrone Tracy had a good year, but it's always fragile when you're talking about a day 3 running back being the top running backs in a class, right? And it's scary. You even mentioned the Giants. I think the Giants are a prime candidate to draft a running back this year. And so I'm looking at it as maybe it's not even so much the super high end backs, the Breece Halls, even to your point, the Joe Mixons and the Josh Jacobs that take a big hit, but more so like the Isaac Guerendos, the ones that we, kind of thought, oh, maybe they could be the equivalent value of like a second rounder and rookie pick or something like that. But they're just toast after what happens in this year's draft, potentially, right? I think that the Bills will keep things the way they have it, and Ray Davis will probably be safe, but maybe they go and add someone else, and they think longer term because James Cook's rookie deal is about to end. There's just a lot of those scenarios out there where, Jalen Wright, you mentioned the Dolphins, like Jalen Wright is sitting there where it's like, okay, is he going to be the RB2 or is he not going to be the RB2? I'm not saying either way. I'm just saying I think that people should be thinking about not just the starters in these situations, but these depth pieces that 1,000,000% are fragile and in these really, really bad places.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do a series at DLF. I'm kind of in the middle of it right now, just called Landscape, basically looking at depth charts. We've got all the RB1s listed, all the RB2s, and there's some pretty obvious gaps on each line there. But, you look at a situation like Chase Brown in Cincinnati had an awesome breakout season, but they have nothing behind him.
Nothing.
100%, they're adding a running back. And if you've got Chase Brown on your roster, you're just hoping it's like a 4th round, goal line type back or something like that.
Right.
Because if they draft, Judkins at the end of round 2, Chase Brown's value is destroyed almost, right?
Right.
It's at least, even if it's not gone, it's at least in a state of confusion. I mean, I remember you go back a couple years ago and a group of us at DLF always get together in random cities across the country to watch the NFL draft. So we're hanging out all weekend. We're responding, kind of in real time to all these picks. And Seattle on day 2 takes Zach Charbonnet, who was viewed as kind of a top 2 or 3 back in that class. And it was immediately viewed as, by us and pretty much everybody else, as a negative for Kenneth Walker. And of course, we kind of know how that's worked out. Charbonnet hasn't done much outside of some injury replacement games. And Walker has mostly been fine when he's been on the field, but that's kind of the default. So if the Bengals draft Judkins on day 2, we're going to look at it as a negative thing for Chase Brown. And then you get to decide if you want to buy low on Chase Brown or just stay away.
Yeah, there's a lot of situations. This is where, in my opinion, it's the most difficult, but also could be the most fruitful for your dynasty teams. Like right now, I called. So the Steelers are in a position where Najee Harris is likely, he's a free agent. Who knows? I don't think that they're not going to necessarily go and re-sign him, but maybe they do. No. Maybe they want Najee Harris. I just don't think it's going to happen. So that leaves Jaylen Warren, who's a restricted free agent on that roster. Now, I see Warren though as a player that we already know that archetype and who he is and what he will likely bring to the table, which is, probably an injury fill-in / maybe a flex play for your roster, especially in like a deeper lineup format, right? Where he's a good pass catcher, full PPR league. We're going to like him a little bit more. He's a solid, efficient back, but never going to be a bell cow, Jaylen Warren. Maybe if this tandem partner gets hurt or something like that and he has a 2-game stretch, what have you. But to me, in this environment, if you had to sort of buy into and this is why he was actually a buy for me on my show this week. If you had to buy into a running back right now, that's kind of the archetype that I would buy into, because you know that he's likely not going to lose an insane amount of value, right? Like I don't think the Steelers are going to repeat their mistake and get another first round running back this year when they have other needs, especially at like wide receiver. So let's say they get a day 2 running back, which is very, very possible in this environment. I think that that's probably the most likely outcome. Maybe they get an early day 3, but regardless, there's still that chance that they don't invest that much in a running back, which would then elevate Jaylen Warren a lot. Whereas if they do go with a day 2 running back, yeah, we're going to like that day 2 running back more, but you still might get a little bit of Jaylen Warren. Right now, if he's at RB 37 in rankings, maybe he goes down to RB 44 or something like that. And you're losing a little bit of that value. But to me, that's kind of the type of player that I would be looking at right now from a veteran perspective if I were to make a move at running back. I'm scared out of my mind, if I'm being honest, about any existing running back, so I'm really not going to be aggressive, and I tried to communicate that much on the buy candidates episode. But do you think that's the right way to look at it? Like, find a guy who, number one, is not overly expensive. So, the difference between Chase Brown and Jaylen Warren is quite dramatic from a valuation standpoint in Dynasty. So get a guy who's not as dramatically expensive, that if things go south, things go south. It's not screwing you, but at least that player, you feel a little insulated with his value in the way that he can at least give you that production, maybe give you 11, 12 points per game in PPR formats and be a flex play and maybe fill in if a guy gets hurt. Is that do you think the proper way to look at some of these running backs right now?
Yeah, in general, I do. I mean, the only thing, and we talked about mistakes dynasty managers make earlier. Another one would maybe be that we as a whole are too reactive. So you think about what's likely, think about Jaylen Warren's likely value arc over the next 3 or 4 months. He's going to hit free agency. He's not getting an offer sheet anywhere else. They put a 3rd round tag or however that works on him. He ends up back in Pittsburgh. And once he's in Pittsburgh, assuming they don't sign a free agent, he's going to see a value spike, because now we see he's in Pittsburgh. He's the top guy there right now. Value goes up a little bit.
Right.
And then the draft comes, right? And then they draft the day 2 guy and the value drops. So I like Warren. I like that type of player as a trade target, as a draft target right now. I think if you wait until draft time, NFL draft time, I think he might even be a little cheaper though.
Yeah. 100. That's a very, very good point. I think post draft, he probably would, right? More than likely. That's what's so hard too. And I'm going to ask you about some buy candidates right now and who you like. But to me, that's sort of the hard part about giving buy and sell candidates in a moment, because a lot of times those transactions are a wait and see kind of situation. It's a really good point with Jaylen Warren. It's like, you don't necessarily have to do it right now unless you think the Steelers are really not going to invest at running back in the draft, because then his value is going to go up a ton, right? But even still, the thought of it right before the draft is going to probably bring him down at least a little bit. So that's a really important note to make, and a good caveat for this next question of, give me some of your buy candidates right now. Like what guys are you going out and looking to trade for?
Yeah, I tried to try to narrow down to one guy per position. Quarterback, again, based on our ADP, this guy stands out. Kyler Murray. He's the quarterback 15 somehow. Expectations were huge last year as he kind of bounced back. Of course, had Marvin Harrison to throw to. I think our buddy Matthew Berry gave him the my guy designation, right? Like everybody was in on Kyler Murray, and
I was.
Oh, I was too. I absolutely was, and in a lot of ways, as a cumulative season, didn't live up to the hype, right? But he still had 8 quarterback 1 games. And maybe the most important thing for me, he stayed healthy. He didn't miss a single game, played the full season. I think the first time he's ever done that in his career. So all of those positives, another year with Harrison, another year with McBride, all of those things. And the best part right now is his price. His price is as cheap, basically as it's ever been. Already talked about Chuba Hubbard at the running back position. He would be the one I would be going for. Not only do I think his job is safe, but he's still super cheap as well. At wide receiver, I'm pretty intrigued with Ricky Pearsall. I can't wait to see how he shows up in your year 2 model because, there was some good and bad, obviously, from his rookie season. Got the understandable slow start after what happened to him there off the field. But I was pretty impressed with what we saw on the field. And that 49ers team really kind of a team in transition. Of course, they've got the injury issues to their veterans. They've got the contract hanging over their head with Brock Purdy. It just feels like one of those guys, probably Deebo Samuel could be gone off that roster. I just look at Pearsall as a guy who's going to get some increased opportunity next year. And those young wide receivers, almost no matter what, right? No matter what their rookie season looks like, they're always so expensive. He's actually a pretty reasonably priced wide receiver 42. So I would be kicking the tires on Pearsall. And then a couple cheap tight ends I love. Noah Gray. I think we kind of saw the start of the takeover. We'll see what happens in the coming days with Travis Kelce, if he's even back with that team, if he's back in the league. Noah Gray's tight end 19. Chig Okonkwo, I think we were just too early on him a couple years ago. He's tight end 23, ended the season really well. So there's a few quick hitters for you.
Yeah, love that call out. Noah Gray was one that I was so close to talking about on the buy candidates episode. Yeah. It's just one of those things that, like, sometimes I don't talk, and this is me revealing a little bit, but sometimes I don't talk about players when it's just super vibes based, and the Noah Gray one is just kind of vibes based at this point, like there's not much to say,
Yeah, we saw the production continue, right?
We did. It got better. You're right. You're right. Yeah.
He had a bigger year than he's ever had. This is a team that's always liked to use multiple tight ends. So even if Kelce is back, I don't think the cost of acquiring Noah Gray is going to hurt you. And for all the kind of winding door, revolving door they had at wide receiver this year, they have a lot of questions going into next year. Worthy is intact there, but Rashee Rice, is he healthy? Is he, suspended? Is he suspended? Is he in prison? Who knows what's going on? I think he's probably a guy I would be going after, but we don't know for sure. And then Hollywood's a free agent. DeAndre Hopkins is a free agent. Juju is a free agent. So I think there's going to be opportunity either way for Noah Gray.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's a good buy. But speaking of Noah Gray, I don't get to have this happen super often, once a year, where I have a perspectives guest the same week as the Super Bowl. So I got to ask you the most bland, plain question imaginable and say, give me a Super Bowl prediction for this weekend.
Man, it's just, I don't even know if I hate to say it because I don't want to be I don't want to be the hater just because they're so good, but it's hard to pick against the Chiefs at this point. I'm going Chiefs in a close one. It's all about Saquon Barkley and their ability to I won't even say stop him, but to slow him down.
Yeah.
And the Chiefs have been so good against the run this year. It's still fun to talk Mahomes and Kelsey and all those guys, but it's been their defense that has really carried them this year. And that's right. I mean, that's like the sign of a great team, is being able to transition and kind of build on your current strengths, not just the same old thing. And obviously Mahomes is still great in many ways, even though he wasn't quite great for fantasy managers, or at least didn't live up to expectations, but obviously still the greatest in the game we have going right now.
Yeah. I'm with you. I got the Chiefs. I'm going to say 27-23. There's going to be like a failed 2-point conversion or something like that, or a missed extra point. That's my
I like it. Yeah, I'm going to go, I'll go 35-32.
Oh, that's a fun one.
Little higher scoring.
Okay. I dig it, man. Thank you so much for hopping on. I always love chatting with you. Always love seeing you at the expo now each year. It's nice to be able to hang out there now on a yearly basis. But let everyone know where they can find you and talk about what the kind of stuff that you're working on.
Sure. Find all my work at dynastyleaguefootball.com. I have written content over there every single week. Do the podcast, the DLF Dynasty podcast, as well every single week. And then find me on Twitter at RyanMC23.
And I'm on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Late Round QB. Make sure you guys are pre-ordering the prospect guide. You can find that over on lateround.com. But enjoy the Super Bowl, everyone. And as always, thanks for tuning in.